Okay, well, hi everyone, and thank you to everyone watching around the world for joining us today and taking an interest in this latest episode of the Simply Inspired podcast. Liam Hartery back with you today, and I'm joined by a very special guest. I'm really honored and humbled to welcome to the show Mr. Scott Mangis. Hopefully, I'm saying that the right way. And
Yeah.
this is a truly inspirational leader, a Zen Buddhist priest, Zen Buddhist minister, former US Marine, PhD, and an energy healer, among many other things, I'm sure. And today we'll be talking about all things spiritual, we'll be talking about awareness, inner peace, compassion, and we'll be learning these lessons from Scott's journey. The flow state is another important topic he touches on, so we will go with the flow today and see where this goes. But as always, there will be some useful tips and lessons that I hope we share with you, the viewers listening anywhere around the world. And I must also say that it is truly a wild one today with the time zones, 13 hours difference, Hawaii to Cyprus. So that is very, very cool. Scott, my friend, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
I appreciate it. And I just wanted to say that, I like my interviews to be very informal, but I just wanted to say that because you have taken this time very early in your morning to do this. So, I'm very grateful, and I'm sure you'd often be up meditating or something, but taking time to do this, I appreciate it. So, you do some amazing, amazing things, and you lived so far a wonderful life helping and touching so many other lives. But obviously, things were not always as they are now. You weren't always in a tropical island paradise. You weren't always involved in Buddhism, as far as I know. So I'd like to go back and just briefly touch on, your early life, where you come from, and where life started for you, please. And let's begin there. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, start flipping over stones from our past, right? I, uh, grew up, I would say fairly normal. If by today's standards, I'm sure they would have drugged me into, semi-states of consciousness as a child because I was never interested in school. My final semester of high school, I had a 0.76 grade point average. I failed every class except for the one I needed to graduate, and I was okay with that. And so, as an early kid, every cell in my body is screaming, "Go outside and play!" And all I'm being told is to sit down and shut up. And yeah, I think they define that as, ADHD now and whatever, word salad or letter salad you want to put behind it. And so I'm fortunate that I grew up in an area where they hadn't invented all the drugs yet that drug me. And but school was always trouble. And I was a bit small. I felt like I got picked on a lot and bullied, and I was just never comfortable in school. And fast forward, I get through high school, eventually finally somehow stumble out the door with a graduate, a diploma in high school. And of course, college wasn't for me. And, being an 18, 19-year-old kid going nowhere in a hurry, I joined the Marine Corps after a friend of mine joined the Navy, and never really looked at that as a future. It was yeah, kind of like crisis management. What do I need to do just to get by? And I was involved with a woman, and like young kids do, we just think life is glorious and it's going to be easy, and we'll get married, and um, started to figure out that that wasn't a great idea. And then, unbeknownst to the two of us, that she'd become pregnant, and so we got married, and our oldest daughter, was born in August, the year that I turned 21. So 4 or 5 months after I turned 21, I had a daughter. And then we had a son. And then our son passed away when he was real small. And that started a bunch of stuff happening in life that you just cannot predict. And being so young and being so overwhelmed with the emotion, the grief, marriage fell apart. And so, a year or two go by, 2 or 3 years go by, it's like you're just, treading water, holding onto a cinder block. It's just, it was an incredible time in life where you just can't seem to gain any traction. And then whatever happens on top of that just feels like it's being piled on and piled on. It becomes very negative. And I was in the Marine Corps, and to the Marine Corps' credit is they do want to take care of you. And shoot, I can't remember this guy's name. He may be long gone by now, but he took me aside, and there was a counselor that was trying to reach me and say, we want to give you some help. And I don't really want to sit down and talk about my feelings. And he took me aside and he said, you're going through a lot of trouble right now, and you're might help your case by when people offer you help, you actually take it and show that you're interested in changing things. And it was some of the best advice I'd ever got. And it turned out I sat down with this woman once or twice a week for a year, and she dug me out of that, helped me dig myself out of that hole. And I remember there were some short-term goals that I had. I wanted to move out of the position or the field that I was in the Marine Corps, and I wanted to move into becoming a flight engineer as a crew member. And I wanted to do that before our son died, and it just, everything went sideways. And she said, if that was a good idea before all this stuff happened, it's probably still a good idea now. And you should pursue your dream. And I've used that over and over, and I've talked to people over and over again. I said, in the middle of a turmoil, in the middle of a crisis, is not a time to make decisions. Some of the decisions that you'd made going in, leading up to that, are still very good decisions, but they're being derailed now by this thing called life. And if you can find your way back and you can get back on that path, you might find comfort in that. You might find that, okay, that's where I'm supposed to be, even though all this other gunk happened and gooned up my life. So I took her advice, and it's a funny story. They were trying to force me to go to training right in the middle of this nasty divorce. And I told this sergeant major, I said, I can't do it. I said, this is unrealistic. I don't, it's a school that there's probably about an 80% attrition rate. It takes 1 to 2 years to get through. And I said, I'm not in the framework mentally, spiritually, emotionally. Of course, I didn't use all those words back then, but I said, I just can't do it. And he said, well, if you don't take these orders, you're never going to get a school seat. And so at that point, I figured I've ended my military career because I didn't want to, I had no place to go. And so there's another guy. I was living in this place called Yuma, Arizona, which is the hottest place on earth. And we'd gone out camping, me and 2 other guys on the Colorado River, and we're just crying in our beer and getting drunk. And I never met this other guy, and he turns out he's in charge of all of the training scheduling for all those different squadrons. So we're on the squadron level, and he's what they call group level. So he controls all this stuff, and we're all drunk. And he said, "Yeah, you want your school seat back? I can get you that." Never think another thing about it. Conversation doesn't even come up the next day. There's no thought in my mind. A couple of weeks later, all hell breaks loose because I've got orders to go to flight engineer training, and I'm in Yuma, and this is in North Carolina, across the country. And everybody's, what the hell's going on here? This guy gave up his orders. He's never going to get those orders back. And another guy in the Marine Corps stepped up that I was working for, and he went to bat for me. And I thought I'd been doing a good job where I was. And he said, this guy's been through a lot, and he's on track. Let's let him go. And to their credit, they let me go. And I graduated from flight engineer training, and I spent the next several years, traveling around the world in a C-130. And it was the best job you could have in the Marine Corps. It was awesome. And so all that adversity, all that stuff, if you stay true to what you think was important, and eventually it delivers. And so one other thought on that is when I was in flight engineer training, we had to clean the instructors' offices, and I'm in there sweeping up with another guy, and there's a list on this board that had the locations where all the flight engineers, there are only 100 of us in the Marine Corps. And there was this guy assigned to Singapore. And I asked this dude, I said, who is this guy living in Singapore? I didn't even know where it was, but it had this magical sound to it. And he said, yeah, he's on an independent assignment down there. You don't wear a uniform. You know, you work at this factory as a quality assurance and flight operations guy, because they take these airplanes from the Marine Corps, and they're on a 6-month refurbishment overhaul contract. And he makes sure the airplane's ready to go, and then they fly it back to the squadron. And I said, I want that job. In my mind, I said, I want that job. And I'll be damned, 8 years later, almost to the day, I was arriving in Singapore, and I had that position. I spent 4 years there. So you talked about visualization to achieve your goals. I was doing that to a certain extent. I didn't know what I was doing, and it worked okay. So maybe the lesson here is you don't have to actually know how this works. You don't even know how, you just do it. You just do it, and it can work out.
Absolutely. I mean, it can. It's not always about, well, it's really about knowledge, and it's usually about practice, and as you know from everything else you do. But that is an amazing story, Scott, even to that point. And even there's so many things in there that people will find relatable. By the way, I relate to the whole school thing. I've got to say that, not to go off on a tangent, but I also narrowly dodged the Ritalin bullet and everything. That's another story. But also, I would like to say before we go any further that I really do appreciate your vulnerability, because I know you're really used to doing talks and everything, and it's not really a question for you. I do just want to say that when you're saying there about your son and everything, I mean, it's not an easy thing to sort of mention in a public space, and I hope that that message helps someone. Every question I ask is framed from, is this going to help someone? But I just want to say that before we go, because before we go any further, because it's not an easy thing to do. Um, when it comes to the Marine Corps and this time in your life in Singapore, did you have any awareness of, um, shall we say, anything more? Because I don't really know the timeline, but obviously the meditation, mindfulness, being a Zen priest, or any of those moments of stillness, but also any awareness of energy as well, because of the energy healing aspect. I can feel that from you as we talk now, by the way, even thousands of miles away. And I felt that a little bit even when we were talking prior to setting this up, by the way, not to go off on a tangent. There's a lovely feeling of, your energy coming through. But were there any glimmers of that, prior to this time or during this time in the Marines, or did that only come later on in your life?
Ah, that's a good question. Looking back, I can say, and this is an exercise that we did during some of the long week-long meditation retreats and things like that. Was there, when you look back, when did you actually start on this path? And most people find that if they keep looking, there was probably some nuggets or some memories from being a child and not fitting in, or knowing that there's something else out there. And metaphysically, what we're talking about is when you're, up to about 3 to 5 years old, you're still remembering past lives. With some people in some camps, that's what they say. So we're always connected, and as we start to grow, the duality shows up, and we start to become, identified as our name, our place, our gender, our skin color, and these become our reality. And we start to shift away from that memory of what that connection to everything is. So I think we all have that. And I can remember there were times as a kid that I just thought there's got to be more to this. This is miserable. And then as I'm growing up and going through my Marine Corps career, I got treated a little bit differently. I got pulled into circles that I wouldn't normally. I was hanging out with people that outranked me by quite a bit. And I was able to implement plans that I could see that would work. And I don't want to say, my personality was such that I was kind of a control freak as I got higher in rank and I could control things. But I was able to see things differently than other people, and I could implement ideas that would work, and I could create solutions. So I felt like I was playing on a little bit different level than the people around me. And I don't, it sounds arrogant and, but not all of us are in the job that we're supposed to be doing. And some of us are just treading water, hoping, to get through what we're going on. And the way the military works is they pigeonhole you into something, whether you like it or not. So a lot of people are doing work or in leadership positions that don't really want to be there. It's not in their DNA. So it's not a conscious thing that they're struggling. It's an unconscious, it's a misallocation of resources, really. And so, yeah, to your point, I felt like, yeah, there was something going on. But this is a very hedonistic lifestyle back then. You climb into a C-130 and, off we go. And there are a crew of 5 of us, and we're halfway across the world, 3 8-hour days inside the airplane, in flight and a little bit of maintenance. And then, we get a day off and we just go drink ourselves in oblivion, set our hair on fire and go run around the town in a foreign country. And so there were elements of, there's something going on, but there are also elements of just living a hedonistic lifestyle. And the mixture was quite, it was hard to see at times, that there was more to life than beyond collecting our per diem and having a good time.
Absolutely. I mean, that really does illustrate again something that I think a lot of people will relate to, especially what you said there about not being in the position where you really belong. And to be honest with you, Scott, I mean, I feel that because as much as I'm talking with you now and I can feel the sort of inner strength that you have, and obviously the discipline it takes to meditate to the level you do and connect that with the military. But in other ways, I mean, there's a lot of warmth and gentleness. And in another way, it's hard to imagine you being in the Marines. I mean, I'm not saying that, they don't have warmth and gentleness, but the machoism and some of the other aspects of the culture. I think, wow, I mean, I can't imagine you there, but it does make sense. It does make a lot of sense. And obviously, in terms of coming into the spiritual side and coming into meditation, I wanted to give the context for people of the whole marine thing and living a totally different life. But when it comes into stepping into the spiritual life, I'm going to say, I mean, as you know, that's not a separate thing. That's something that's in our day-to-day life. But when it comes to becoming aware of, say, shall we start with meditation? Where did that happen for you? I mean, you said about Singapore, so I'm thinking maybe there was something there. But what were your first sort of encounters with those kind of things, basically?
Yeah, so in preparation, so while I was in Singapore, I was coming up on retirement, and I had an undergraduate degree in aviation, and I envisioned myself in the financial sector, and like I guess back in 96, 97, 90, 98, I was trading stocks, stock options and things like that. And I was doing well, but in the context that everything was going up back then. So my hubris, my ego took over, thought, okay, this is simple. So I'll continue on. So I got a graduate degree in finance while I was in Singapore, and I turned in my dissertation a couple of days before we moved from Singapore to California. And so we moved to San Diego, and I had to do one more year, and then I could retire. And I was done with the Marine Corps by then. I'd been in independent assignment for 4 years and not wearing a uniform, just I had all kinds of autonomy. We oversaw maintenance contracts in 6 different countries. And it was just to go back to squadron life. It was I was a square peg and it was a round hole, and they didn't want me and I didn't want them. And so my arrogance caught up with me in the Marine Corps, at the end of my tour, because I just thought I knew everything and I forgot my place. I forgot how things worked. And so the last year I spent was torture. And we parted ways. I retired and went to work as a commodity broker and in San Diego. And if you would have opened an account with me and you would have taken the opposite of every trade that I recommended, you would have made a lot of money. You know, I couldn't buy a winning trade. And it wasn't because I wasn't smart. It wasn't because I wasn't trying. It wasn't because I hadn't done research. But trading is a lot, 99% emotionally driven. And if you're not in charge of your emotions, if you don't understand your emotions, if you don't understand your relationship with money, then trading is going to be a rough sport for you. And that's what happened. So I was losing money. I quit the company I worked for because I thought they were crooks, and started my own, and couldn't make my clients any money. It's just so humbling. And there's a bifurcation point. People split it. In my experience, people split at this point. And it's always going to be, I'm a victim, and the market did this to me, and they did this. They use the pronoun. They did this. They did that. Or you look in the mirror and say, okay, that dude is not getting this right, and he's got to go inside and figure out what's going on. So that's when the light switch hit for me. There's no solution outside of me. It's got to be inside. And I started meditating, and I started listening to tapes. I went to a Tony Robbins seminar. I went to a T. Harv Eker seminar, and I really embodied some of the things they said, that, you can change your world and you have control. And I found that a lot easier to handle than the idea that I'm going to change, I'm going to influence what the Federal Reserve does to interest rates. It's going to make my trade go the right way. So, and my personality is that once I'm in all the way. And so that became an hour of meditation that turned into 2, that turned into 3. And it just kind of steamrolled from there. And well, I'll let you go from there. I don't want to go too far down one rabbit hole.
Well, no, I mean that's part of the fun, though, Scott, is you never know with these talks how deep the rabbit hole goes, as you say. But it is amazing because obviously on a personal level with your work with the meditation, I've done a lot of research on that, and I was sort of preparing for this. But when it comes to finding out about your earlier life, obviously I knew about the marine thing, but some of these other things, it's like, wow, I mean, what a difference. And the awakening that you had there, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense actually when you explain it that way. But that is one of the important realizations that I hope that people take away, the answers being within, especially if they're on the beginning of this type of journey. So yeah, okay. So the meditation, as you were saying, that developed, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and so forth. But more than that, I mean, eventually, and correct me if I ever jump ahead in time or move around in time, but obviously you made the decision to actually be ordained, and you actually lived a totally different lifestyle. And obviously concept, and I'm speaking very broadly here, but the sort of priestly lifestyle and renunciation and some of these things from what you were saying earlier of, the Marine
Yeah.
and Wall Street, it's fascinating. I mean, it fascinates me to no end. And I'm really glad that we're touching on the inner journey because that's what this is all about. So how did that progress? If I mean, we're basically just continuing from what you were saying there, but in terms of not only the timeline, but in terms of what you were experiencing in life at that time. I think that would be so valuable for people.
Okay. Yeah. It wasn't all roses. So this is how trading works. There are numbers out there you'll find if you do some research. It says that 3 to 5% of the people that trade their own money actually succeed, and 95 and 98% of us fail. And so you're up against some pretty daunting statistics in terms of your chances for success. And I was firmly in that 98% group. And so, 3 times in my life, I lost every penny I had and had to go find a job and make some money and start over. And I felt like I was supposed to be trading. I felt like I was, I was on, I could never come up with a reason to quit. And I say I would talk to the guy in the mirror and I'd say, okay, you want to quit? This is terrible. who are you going to call first? And I could never come up with a name. I was never going to pick up the phone and say I quit. And so it was always a matter, okay, I got to scrape together some more money and get started again. And this is something that's fairly common for people that do this self-torture. And one of the jobs I took was with this company that had this really cool idea that if you have a lot of debt, and how to get out of debt, how to restructure your debt using a home equity line versus a credit card and things like that, using simple interest to pay off compound daily interest. And they had some really good stuff. And then we were doing seminars all over the country. And I was going to be in charge of California, Southern California. And I was in a training session with these people just a couple of weeks in. And it came to find out that they had really no interest in people are signing up. They're paying a couple $1,000s for this service. But their focus wasn't on how to support them. Their focus was on how to get more people to sign up. And they didn't really care. They didn't have a plan. And my personality was, I'm going to call bullshit. And so we get in a pretty big argument, two vice presidents, or the COO and the vice president, and they won. So they fired me. And I went back to the hotel, and a buddy of mine had been telling me, he said, I know you don't want to go back into the aircraft world, but there's a job in Tokyo with Rolls-Royce as an aircraft field service engineer. It's got your name on it. And if you want it, they're looking for somebody. And I told him no, and he never followed up with anybody. He didn't work for Rolls-Royce, he worked for another company. So I went back to the hotel, pissed off, and immediately picked up my phone and called him. And I said, hey, is that spot still open? Can you talk to them? Did you say anything? He said, no, it's still open. I didn't tell him you made any decision. So the next morning he called them, put my name in the hat. A couple of interviews later, I'm scheduled to go to Tokyo. And my wife and I moved from San Diego to Tokyo in 2009. And still, I'm heavy into meditation practice and self-help, spirituality. At this point, it's just kind of a bunch of nonsense. It's not something I had embodied yet because I'm still creating all this struggle in my life. We get to Tokyo, and about a year after I get to Tokyo, I'm at a bar, an expat bar in Tokyo, and the owner's from Holland, and he said, oh, there's this guy that comes in with this Zen monk. You guys might have a good conversation. And I met this English guy, and he said, oh yeah, the Zen master's coming to my apartment for meditation, what they call Zazen in Japan. Now, why don't you come over? And that was the first time I met a Japanese Zen master. It's the first time I had introduced to anything about Buddhism. And we sat down and we did meditation for about an hour and a half, and it wasn't hateful. It's just meditation. And then we sat at this guy's dining table while he cooked dinner, and we drank beer and we talked about stuff. And this Zen master put everything so simply, so concise, and the energy coming off of this guy was it was profound, and the peace. And he said, would you like to come to my temple to do Zazen? I said, I'd love to. And that started a relationship that lasted 10 years. And so here I am in my office in Tokyo, and I say, well, I got to get out of here. So I would take off and go to the temple and bring some beer. And so we'd sit in the afternoon for 2 or 3 hours. Then he would make a little dinner, and then he and I would just sit at this little table, sipping beer and talking. And we did this over and over again. And I had this guy all to myself for the first couple of years because he wasn't popular yet. And then people started hearing about him, and people saying he's enlightened and this and that. And then people started showing up to live with him, and things changed. But by that time, I'd had these 2 or 3 years of asking this beautiful man every question you can imagine and getting every answer, which was always the same answer. Just forget about it. Just sit on your cushion. It'll be okay. But is let go of your attachment. If you let go of your attachment, all the other stuff works itself out. And so that's where well, let me back up for a second. So after a couple of years of me hanging out with this guy, I'm now going to work, and I'm miserable at work because I don't want to be there anymore. And my wife and I had been trying to have a child for 7 years. She became pregnant, and our daughter was born in January of 2013. And I remember the day, and he'd been whispering in my ear about the money, because I made a lot of money, and I lived in a company apartment, had a company car in Tokyo, and it was a pretty nice lifestyle. And I remember the Zen master whispering in my ear about, you don't need the money, you don't need this. And I never really paid attention until our daughter was born. And it was such an overwhelming experience having another child and going through all that again. And my wife was laying in my lap. We're on the floor in this midwife's house in Tokyo. And I watched this little baby come out, and my wife just reaches down and just pulls her baby up and puts her on her chest. And we're all, I'd never experienced anything so profound, because I was finally in a place to experience what was taking place, rather than living there in my mind, trying to make sense out of it, trying to prepare for it. It was just happening. And it's hard to explain, but having that meditation experience creates that state where you're just there experiencing what's going on, and not having an intellectual conversation in your mind about it. And then we lay there for 15 minutes, so the baby gets acclimated on my wife's chest, and I get to cut the cord. And then it's time to take care of my wife. So the nurse and I go into this other room, and she checks out the baby and cleans her up, wraps her up in a blanket, and says, "Here." And I sat on top of this examining table in Zazen with our daughter laying in my lap for an hour while they took care of my wife. And it's impossible to describe that 1 hour meditation experience with a child that's brand new, 20 minutes old. And we did that routine every day for 3 months, for an hour every day of Zazen together. And every time was just profound. And it's almost as if I remember sitting down with her, and I remember something kind of startling me out of, after an hour, that something would kind of come to my attention. I realized where I was. I'd never had that experience before. In the temple, we would do 10 hours of meditation a day, 9 to 10 hours. And your mind gets so exhausted, and your body's so sore, and you're just so exhausted, everything shuts off. And it goes for 2 or 3 seconds, and your mind says, "Oh, holy shit, did you see that?" That's it. And it's not really it. But each one of those 1 hour experiences were just so, it's just, you can't explain it or describe it. So after going through that, I couldn't go back to work. I just remember kissing them goodbye one morning. I said, "No, I'm done." And I had to call my boss one evening, and he lived in the US, and he said, "Yeah, we want to move you. We want to move you here, there." He said, "Pat, I think you're doing a great job, and I think you're trying to find something that works for me, but I don't care. I quit. I resign. Just get a replacement here. I'm done." My wife, I hung up the phone, and I felt this huge relief. It was glorious. And I look across the room, and my wife's holding a baby. And she said, "What did you just say?" I hadn't discussed it with her. And of course, they got a replacement, and about 6 weeks later, they kicked us out of our apartment. They took my car, and we found another place to live. And for the next 6 years, I went from being a worker to being a stay-at-home dad. And if you've seen the video about me in Tokyo, I'm standing there with my bowl and chanting. So I went from making $240,000 a year to standing in front of train stations chanting and getting donations to live on. And that was a 6-year stretch. That was a 6-year experience that you can imagine over that 6-year period, going from, I love flying business class and first class, and I don't get to do that anymore. And then all your attachments about money. And you're standing there for a couple hours a day, sometimes 6, 7 days a week in terrible weather, people, kids messing with you. It's just it just triggered memory after memory after memory. And you're just standing there like a statue, letting them roll over you and just letting them, dissipate. It was profound. And then at some point it all clicks and you're just standing there and just standing here. And sometimes you're really surprised because somebody drops some change in your bowl and you didn't even see them coming. Yeah. Sometimes somebody come by and tell you that, my husband died, my girlfriend left me, and this one guy, on his way, he would drop off some money and then he'd go drinking with his friends and he'd come back, he'd ask for money because he didn't have any money for the tree. I just handed him my bowl. But it was just a really cool experience to get all of that attachment, all of that stuff that I built up for, at this point, 40 something years, and just to let it run its course and get it out of my system. And that's really where the magic happened. Was that 6 years of just spending the day at the park with my daughter, watching her examine every bug, every flower, having the awareness to just stand there and watch her instead of saying, hurry, we have to go, or we have to hurry, but just to be a witness to this beautiful thing that's happening and not have a judgment about it. And I'm not sure where we started on this, but it was that's where the whole Zen Buddhism kicked in, is where I finally made the choice to get rid of my corporate life. I was living a life that on paper made a lot of sense. Let me say it this way. On paper, I checked every block. I'm a man, I'm taking care of my family, I'm providing. But in my heart, I had no joy in that. And so my inner world did not match my outer world. And it created a heck of a lot of turmoil, a heck of a lot of stress. When I finally made the decision to unite my inner world with my outer world, poof, it all goes away.
It's an incredible story, Scott. I mean, I'm just taking it in and everything because there's so many lessons in there. I mean, I'll be listening to this back, taking notes, but even what you were saying earlier about the inner world and the responsibility and letting things pass. I mean, it's beautiful. Even what you were saying about those magical moments, and those special moments of awareness. I mean, it's very profound. What you were saying about meeting that Zen master, that monk. I mean, it's so relatable. I had the same thing when I first met a monk, and I remember looking and thinking, this guy has nothing, and I mean, he's not in a relationship, doesn't have any money. I mean, he's the happiest guy I've ever seen, and back then I was thinking he's happier than me. Okay, back then that wasn't hard to do, but also he's happier than everyone else I know. And I was thinking, I just can't figure this out. And what you were saying there of, feeling the presence, and I totally relate because that's something that kind of started my own journey in its own way. So obviously, from having these profound experiences, you kind of shifted. I mean, I don't know how you define this, but you kind of moved into the space of being the one sharing them as well as being the one experiencing them. And you teach and you help people and you contribute. I mean, I'm not sure how you define that, but basically you make a difference to a lot of people's lives through everything. I mean, even this kind of thing now, and even, by the way, Scott, I have to say, even sitting in your presence now, I can feel that, that lovely, peaceful feeling. So even that has an effect on people. And really, I guess my question is, when you shifted from experiencing that joy and that bliss, or again, I don't think words really do it justice, but you know what I mean. And then obviously sharing that with people, or at least pointing them in the direction of how they can have it themselves. How did that kind of transition come to be? Because some people just stay there, don't they? I mean, some people stay very much in the experience, but you kind of thought, I want to give this out. So let's talk about that, please. Thank you.
Sure. My personality is fairly strong ego, and so part of the thing that happens, though, look at me. and it became kind of an ego experience. And I'm going to share all this Zen stuff. And this friend of mine, she told me the term. She said it's called Zen stench, where you think you've got it figured out now, so you just need to stand on a chair in a crowded room and speak to everybody, and they're going to get it. And I think probably a lot of us go through that kind of a natural progression, because it is exciting when things start to get easier. I was a real crap magnet, and I'd always attract these people into my life that were troublesome. And I would always attract these situations and these relationships that were troublesome. And I remember one day I woke up and I looked around, I thought, holy cow, where'd all the trouble go? I went from, being financially destitute to, making a ton of money in Tokyo, and then meeting a Zen master, having a child, and then leaving that. And now I'm just, spending my day kind of laying in the park with a small child, or I'm sitting on a cushion all day at a temple. And I didn't really notice how all that happened, but it did happen. And so that kind of fed an ego that said, okay, I can help you. And so maybe it's just a process of understanding, how do I help somebody? And first is, well, I'm going to tell you about it. And if you're not in a position to listen to me, and more likely the case was you never really asked me, and I just thought you needed to know. And then that's a little troublesome. So once I started to realize I can only tell my experience of things. And this is what the Zen master whispered in my ear. He says, you're not a Zen master. And the term they use is comes from the Sanskrit as a bodhisattva. So you're an enlightened being that continues to live on earth to help other people become enlightened. And he said, make no mistake, you're no bodhisattva, you're no Zen master, you're no teacher. The only thing you get to do is tell people what your experience is. And if you do that, then you won't sound like such a jerk. And it was, again, some of the best advice I've ever had. And so I went from almost in a state of proselytizing about, okay, this is what you need to do, to, well, hey, man, this is what worked for me. You might want to give it a shot. And that's when things started to click. And this is when the energy work started to integrate into this, is because my mother had small cell lung cancer, and it had metastasized everywhere. And she elected to have chemotherapy. And this was starting in 2008, 2009. And we knew chemo wasn't going to save her, but that's what she wanted to do. And it was going to buy her some time. And part of me had been reading and studying about energy and this interconnectivity, and the quantum stuff that's trendy about entanglement and interconnectivity and things. And so I knew about energy medicine, and I was just interested as well, what can we do that would help? And we got her on this program that was from this company called AIM, and they use a frequency, they use pictures of people. It was pictures hold quantum energy of us. They're a quant of us. And they bombard these pictures with healing energies, kind of long similar to what Royal Raymond Rife came up with, the balancing energies. And so the whole family got on them, and we could do 5 people. And I'm sure they're still in business. And so my dad was kind of a health train wreck back then, and he's 91 now. Still going. My mom had a couple of years, but her cancer finally got to her. My wife and I wanted to have a baby for 7 years. We never did, but finally, within a number of months of being on this program, she became pregnant. And the idea was, it was expensive. And I wanted to figure out, okay, how can I do that myself? And that's where I started researching. And then I realized, well, pretty much anybody can do this if you can achieve the right mind state, if you can achieve the right meditative state, the right called brainwave frequency. If you can get into theta, you can get into delta, then you can access this source energy, and you can, through intention, transmit that to somebody else. And so there was a lot of trial and error. There was a couple of years of practicing on myself, or practicing with my daughter and my wife. And then there was starting with other people. And generally the only person people that would want to talk to you about this is somebody that's stage 4 cancer. Because anything sounds good when you have stage 4 cancer. And I made a commitment back then that I was never going to charge anybody for this. Because the attachment to money probably contributes to a lot of our health issues, the stress surrounding our lack of control in life, and that what money would provide control for us. So the idea was, okay, the money's never going to be part of this equation. So I said, I'll work with you as long as you want me to. And then I started learning about it, and I got sick sometimes. You know, it was just a really weird couple-year experience. And I finally got into a routine. And that's when, and I finally realized I'm not healing anybody. I'm sending you energy and you're going to heal yourself. So I made some adjustments in my mindset. I made some adjustments in the process. And we started seeing people that would, you know, come with cancer that would find a way to heal themselves. And it works very well with depression. It works very well with anxiety. It works very well with, you know, my life sucks and I want it to get better. You know, that kind of just feeling this angst about the way the world works. It helps you get past that pretty well. And I'm very interested in doing this with children with autism. And I've reached out to a number of societies and groups in different ways, and I've never gotten any feedback or never response. So if anybody's listening and your child's autistic, you know, contact me and we'll go to work. This is energy work that it's done remotely while you're usually asleep. And there are people that I do it with here on the island that we started doing it in person. And it's really pretty cool. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. I mean, you answered a lot of wonderful topics contained in each topic that you cover, if you like. And I think that's wonderful. I mean, the way you combine the energy awareness. And as I already said at the beginning, I felt that. I mean, when we were talking, setting up this interview, I felt that from you. But I actually had a strange, I mean, I'm not sure if you were doing it consciously or not, but one day we were talking, I was quite stressed out, you know, and I do some of the mindfulness and things as I go through the day, but it was quite overwhelming. And I actually felt a feeling coming from you of all people of like a wonderful calm, you know, and I thought, gosh, that's really weird. I thought, okay. And it actually I don't know if you were doing that or if that was just coming because we were connected or something. I mean, I'm very much one of those people where, you know, I feel what other people feel and people say empathic and this, that, and the other. And I also have the ability to energy heal, by the way, though I've never formally trained it. But at the same time, you know, I felt that from you and it was a lovely feeling. So thank you. I mean, I don't know if you were doing it consciously. I would like to touch on something here, though, Scott, as we come into the latter phase of this talk. When I read your website, you described about your mother and about that situation, and I'm kind of sorry to bring this up, but at the same time, I really think it will help people to hear it, because you said that you actually had the feeling of her soul actually,
Mm,
and I thought, well. Okay, yes, I'd like to ask you that. I mean, I know it's a personal question, and I've already said I respect your vulnerability. I mean, I do a lot of these talks, and I always respect that. But with yourself in particular, Scott, I mean, the way you're talking about, like, not only the supposed highs and lows of people's outward lives, but also, you know, your own flaws and you know your good points, your bad points. I mean, I know that term doesn't exactly apply either, but you know what I mean. Of you're very open about these things, and I've got so much respect for that because this interview also shows that vulnerability is not a weakness. I mean, not to sound cliche, but you're really
yeah.
embodying that. Anyway, not to go off topic, I did want to say that to you, but yeah, with that spiritual experience that you had there. I would like to share that in the purposes of helping people, but I imagine it's not easy for you to discuss either. So my apologies for that in a way, you know.
That's okay. I'm glad you brought this up because that incident of being with my mother, holding her when she left the body, we say, uh, profoundly changed everything for me because, and as I said on the website, whatever doubts I had about our eternal nature, they left the room. So my mom was in hospice, and my father, she just moved there earlier that day. We were in Michigan, and my father was at the hospice. My sister and I were at our parent at their house, and he wanted to stay there, and he was going to sleep there. And the forecast was for 12 inches of snow or something the next day. And I remember waking up at 1 a.m. or maybe 2 a.m., just sat straight up in bed, and I said, I need to be there. And I didn't bother my sister. I just drove to the hospice, and I think my mom was the only one in that. It's just a big house in this hospice, and she may have been the only person staying there. And there was a nurse on duty, and she let me in. My dad was trying to go to sleep, and he was just all over the place with what was going on. And I said, it's supposed to snow like crazy tomorrow, starting around noon. Why don't you go home, get some sleep in the bed, get a shower, you and Lori come back. And if we get snowed in, then we can get snowed in here and we can just stay. Because we all expected, mom to be there for a couple of days. And he said, okay, good idea. He left. And then about 3:30 in the morning, I was sitting out in the living room. My mom was in her room with the door open, and she had this labored breathing pattern that was going on, and she was no longer really with us. It appeared that she'd had a stroke. The way her face looked, she was really not conscious anymore, and she wasn't interacting with us, and she seemed to be sleeping. And I just went out to sit on the couch out in the living room for a little bit, and I'll be, being a trader. So what I do at 3 a.m, I look at the gold market, and it just opened my laptop, and I heard her breathing change, and I thought, oh, and I closed the laptop, and I went in, I sat next to her, and I got my hand under the back of her head, and my left hand was holding her left hand, and her breathing started to change and started to slow down. And I intuitively knew that this was something, this was important. And I just sat there breathing with her rather than just dissolving into that moment, into that experience. And I knew there's an emotional element to this, but it can be dealt with later. So every time something like that would come up, I could just let go of it through a breath, and I could match my breathing pattern with hers. And finally, there was that time where she takes that breath in, and then the exhale, and then there's nothing. And rather than letting the grief come up, it was me being present and just continuing to breathe and continuing to watch. And the Tibetans have this idea that the people in the room when somebody passes, if you can stay quiet, if you can stay peaceful, the soul will leave, and the soul will sense that there's peace in the room. The soul can then depart. If there's a lot of turmoil, there's crying, there's anguish, the soul doesn't want to go. And for some reason, that was in my brain. And then two things came to mind, and this is how minds work. There was a Mel Gibson movie, I can't remember which one it was, but these Aztec or Inca, they were sacrificing all these people, and this guy gets up to the top, and he's going to be next. And they were sacrificing people to bring rain, I think. And he was going to be next. He turns to the guy behind him. The guy behind him says, "Travel well." And then there's the Ozzy Osbourne song. And the lyric is, "I'll see you on the other side." So these are the two things that showed up in my mind in this moment. And I said, "Travel well, and I'll see you on the other side." And I watched this energy come up, and it hovered right above the bed for a little while. And then it just disappeared through the ceiling. And I looked back down at my mom, and it was so striking because that figure now wasn't my mom anymore. It was, I don't want to say it was shocking, but this realization was that's the animating spirit of that human form. And that animating spirit had just left. I watched it leave. And when I looked back down, it was just form. It didn't have the light. It didn't have the color. And it was just an instant, and it all changed. And I sat there for quite a while, and finally I went out and I told the nurse, and she went in and prepared my mom, and I called my mom, and my dad, and my sister, and they came and to say goodbye. And my dad said, "Do you want to go in and see your mom one more time before we leave?" And I said, "Dad, that's not my mom." And I just remember thinking, I don't want to be the last. That's the last visual, or the last sight I have of her, is this form without the animating spirit. And I want to keep the one that I saw just before. And so with that experience, it took me it gave me confidence. Let me put it that way. Maybe that's a word. It gave me confidence to believe in, first of all, what I was doing energetically had a difference. And that if I trust, if I believe, and I don't need you to believe in it, your higher self will take care of it, is what I came to realize, that there's that animating force that is in charge. And if I can get you to acknowledge that your higher self can help you, if you can believe that, if you give me permission to allow me to send energy to you, then that's all we really need to make this work. And so in a sense, it simplified things, and it brought in this huge boost of confidence that there's something going on here that I don't have to understand it. I can't articulate it, but I know.
Yeah, from the experience, I mean, it makes sense, but wow, very brave, sharing that, Scott. And I knew that, I mean, I know it's out there anyway, and you chose to put that on your website, but I think it's such a valuable lesson for people, especially with that side, because I mean, with that subject, we've gone a little bit beyond like the meditation and things into another level of spiritual awareness. And I think it's really valuable to share. But that's why I said, in a way, I kind of felt like, that's a difficult one to ask. But at the same time, I think that if people are in doubt about, this kind of topic, and hearing something like that, and yeah, I mean, when you see someone you love, I mean, yeah, I saw that with my grandmother and things, and when I went to see the body, and it's just a shell. But at the same time, if people, when you were physically there with the passing and everything, I heard that and I thought, wow, I mean, it's really touching. I don't think words can do it justice again. I can feel that
Yeah.
from you, but it's good to mention it. Now, last couple of things, I'll have to go. Shortly, fairly shortly, and I think you've got things to do as well. But the last thing I'd like to touch on with this talk, Scott, and it's gone really well because I had the feeling, by the way, just to talk to you about your experiences. In the beginning, I was thinking, okay, should I talk with him about like certain topics like compassion and this and that? And I thought, no, that would just come from the story in the sense that we talk about that, like what you said earlier about you can only share your experience, and then what people make of it from there is up to them. I love that analogy. So really, my last question for you is obviously where you're going to take this. I mean, because you're teaching people, you're contributing to people, you have other things you'd like to do, like the autism. Um, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but you have a very wonderful, vibrant presence. So you've obviously got a long time to continue this kind of work. I mean, as soon as we're talking about death and everything, I'll just say how I see it. I mean, you've obviously got a lot of years ahead to continue to develop this understanding and share this understanding. So my last question, because I'd like to show people that it is a journey, not a destination, as we know all too well, I'm sure, is where you would like to go from here. And somewhere in this, I would like to feed in how people can contact you, because obviously there will be people listening to this all around the world. So I'm hoping that some of them will reach out. But yeah, I mean, obviously having done, the priesthood, if you like, or the renunciation, however you define that. I mean, now you're doing the energy healing. What are some of your goals? Because you picked up on my visualization video, and so I know that being in the present is the only moment we have, but there are still ambitions that you have. I can feel that from you. So it'd be good to briefly talk about some of those, and then I'll have to go on the hour. But that'll be a nice topic to close out with, I think.
Okay. I was having a conversation with somebody just yesterday, and I came to the realization that, um, you know, I became the priest of this temple, and this temple is not without its troubles. And I work for a temple board, and we don't get along. And there were some questions I probably should have asked before we moved from North Carolina, before I accepted this position. And there were probably some things I should have thought of, and I realized, had I asked all those questions, had I dug into the details, I wouldn't be here right now. And so I did exactly what I needed to do to accept this position, and they moved us here, and they're very generous in allowing us to bring our stuff. And I realized this, I'm supposed to be here probably. I don't know if I'm supposed to be at this temple forever. I don't know if this temple will survive financially. I don't know if the board members have the drive to make the necessary changes to ensure that we have, that we're going to be a going concern for the next 10 years. But I'm in the right place, and I was a little torn up with this turmoil here, and there's a beautiful swimming beach less than a mile away. And I went to the beach and I swam a mile, and then I crawled up on the beach, and I hide this piece of driftwood in the bushes, and I put the driftwood on the sand, and I roll up my towel and I put it on top of that, and I meditate for an hour to watch the sunset. And so after a mile swim and after an hour of meditation, I realized, okay, I'm in the right spot, but this may not be the right job, or this job is going to change, and it's going to change at its pace. I can't make a sunflower bloom faster. I can't make a kitten grow faster. So one of the things that, I come to realize is, okay, I may be in the right place, but it may not be the schedule that I would like. So anytime these things come up, it's another opportunity to practice this idea that I need to let go of an attachment. Because no matter how evolved you are, the joke at the temple was, when you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family over Christmas. And to that one, I add, if you think you're enlightened, go shopping at Costco on Sunday in Kauai. It's just pure madness. So, coming to the realization that I'm still learning, that I'm still here to experience, that nothing is perfect and nothing is a concrete. And, as we say, anything that changes is not real. And that which doesn't change is real. So you ask what doesn't change, and I always tell people, I said, the person you were before your mother met your father, the person you were before your mother met your father, that's who you are. That doesn't change. But all this other stuff is transitory. And so it's good to have goals. It's good to have dreams. And attachment to goals, attachment to dreams, that creates suffering. But it's a very fine line. And another analogy is I tell people that come to our meditation group on Sundays, I said, come on Tuesday because we don't ring the bell very much. So it's going to be a lot longer. Or come on Wednesdays to the beach. We do a sunset meditation at the beach. There's no bell. You just sit there until you can't sit any longer. And I said, what I want you to do is I want you to push that envelope a little bit between perseverance and torture. Because it's a very fine line and it doesn't stay in the same place. And the idea is, when I'm pursuing my dreams, when I'm pursuing my goals, how did I design those is what becomes important. And was it something I formed in my heart, or was it something I formed in my head? And that will give you a clue whether or not you're on the right path. And if you can get out of your mind, get into a meditative state, and go for a walk in nature, go float in the water. If you're into pottery, making pottery probably puts you in that state. If you're a tennis player and you're good at tennis and you just get into a rally. The thing about martial arts or, Thai boxing, what I did, where I met Brandon Vera, he was my boxing Thai coach. When you're in the ring sparring, there's no time for thinking. It's pure flow state. It's kind of like chess on steroids. There's all the stuff that goes into sparring, the pain, the fear, the breathing, the strategy that all goes out the window. But it's a flow state. And so there are things that we can all do that will put us in that state. And from that state, then we access this heart energy that says, okay, what do you want? What do you want, Liam? What are you sure about? And this is, how we can gain confidence. Okay, this was a good idea before my mind got involved. It's a good idea after my mind is out of it. And I'm just going to keep pushing. And knowing that, you're the writer in this long running TV drama called Liam's Life. You're the audience, you're the producer, you're the actor. We play all parts. And it's a matter of realizing, okay, I'm playing a part and how do I want to play it? That's where the magic happens, is to be the witness to what's going on.
Wow. What a way to close out, my friend. That is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful description. And I mean, it's fantastic. I'd like to thank you very much for, as I said at the beginning, first of all, making the time for this so early in the morning. But more than that, I'd like to thank you for being such an open book in the sense of what I said earlier, the vulnerability. And I mean that as a compliment that you show. It's powerful in and of itself. And I know that comes with these practices, I mean, I'm slowly embracing that more and more, but at the same time, it's really admirable, and I really respect that, because the way that you've shared, like I said earlier, not just the perception of allegedly what people call the highs and lows, but in terms of the actual things within yourself and the different experiences, and even the synchronicity that you mentioned of being on a beautiful island. I mean, there's some beautiful beaches here in Cyprus, but what you were saying there, you sold me for a visit. So I'm definitely going to have to plan a vacation or something. But being in the right place at the right time, I really think that's a valuable message as well. So I mean, I knew this would be a good interview, and I was looking forward to it, but it's honestly exceeded what I thought it would be. And the most wild bit of all is we've probably only scratched the surface with your life. I mean, I'm sure of that. But at the same time, all I was really hoping for was like some of the fun stories from your experiences, and then some of the lessons, from your experiences. And we've ticked that, and then some, because everything else from that is just, wherever it flows. So, just a really, really big thank you for
Oh,
everything that you've shared, my friend. I mean, I'm really grateful for that.
and a pleasure for me as well. Easy to talk to, and I think you draw out what needs to be drawn out. So I appreciate that. And yeah, I hope it to be continued, and you're certainly welcome to come sit with us on a Sunday in Kauai.
I would love to. I would love to. That would be wonderful. Obviously, if you're ever over this way in Europe, you'd be very, very welcome here as well. But it's wonderful because, like I said before, just to close out with this, when I was setting this up, I certain people, I talk with them a mix of like the story and the specifically the lesson. And with you, I just had this feeling of, don't worry about the themes, just talk about the story, and everything will come. And I really think, especially for those people, Scott, who are in the beginning of the journey, if there's a beginning, but in terms of coming into that awareness, of that there's something more and so forth, especially for those people who are a little bit lost, because we've both been there in our own way, and a lot of other people are there now. I really think it will help them. So thank you so much. I will send this to you as well when I release it. So if you have any uses, you more than welcome to share. And yeah, I'd love to keep in touch with you from beyond this
All
point.
right. Yeah, very good. Thanks again. Have a
Cool.
good-
Thank you, and you have a good day. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.